We're Nick Lombardino and Zach Blumenfeld, co-founders of CultureCon. Welcome to a special series on the CultureCon podcast, WorkPossible.
This series is brought to you in partnership with our friends at Fauna, a global employee experience agency who design great workdays for happier people, stronger teams, and better businesses. Just like us, Fauna believes in human experience design and big business impact.
In each episode, Fauna will host conversations that push us to reimagine and redefine what it means to experience work, with people who are pushing what's possible in employee experience, from first hellos to fond farewells.
The WorkPossible series starts now.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to WorkPossible, a new podcast series from the CultureCon folks. And I'm Elaine Page, Chief People Officer and Chair of Fauna's Board of Advisors. It's great to be back with you today.
And I'm Hattie Roach, co-founder and strategy chief at Fauna. So, in a world where the workplace is being redefined daily, we're ditching the checklists and reimagining what leadership, culture, and employee experience could really look like. WorkPossible is a podcast about rethinking work from the ground up. We're going to be asking why we're still doing things in the same way if everything really is different at work. So no scripts, no safe answers, just real talk about what's possible if we bin the playbook. We're going to be having conversations with people shaping and reshaping the work experience, from CEOs of startups to big thinking chief people officers to innovative communications experts. And today, we couldn't be more excited to get this totally unique perspective from someone who I know will always push to do what's right over what's easy. We're chatting to Martin Fitzpatrick, multi-award winning global employee communications and engagement director. Martin comes with a background of leading comms and engagement teams in iconic brands from Vodafone to BT to currently Ericsson. So, Martin, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. Delighted to be here.
Well, I'm so excited too, because I just love talking to somebody that's responsible for communications and engaging the workforce. I just know how hugely important that has been to me in my career to have a partner like you. So I'm really honored that you're here with us today. One of the things that Hattie and I are really curious about, the people we're speaking to, is this idea of, rewriting the rules, like not following the same playbooks, not, resisting the chance to do something different or being afraid of it. And so, one of the things we're really curious about is, if you could rewrite a rule or something that you've encountered in the workplace, or just literally scrap it entirely, or as, Hattie likes to say, what would you do if you could bin the playbook? I tease her about this all the time because, bin is not an American word. But is there something that just immediately jumps to mind? You're like, oh, just get rid of that, or let's stop doing it.
Yeah, there definitely is. And I can't take credit for this. I read a fabulous book called The Rebel's Playbook by Deborah Corey, and I forget the other chap's name, but a fabulous book. And one of the things I was reading it, she's like, why do we send people like employee induction packs, like welcome books are very rarely like welcome books, right? It's like, hey, welcome to the company on page 1. And then maybe something about the brand on page 2. And then page 4 to 500 is the 99 ways you could lose your job at this company. It's like rules and regulations and processes and things you must do and things you shouldn't do and things you must never do. And what a crazy way to welcome people to your business. I mean, it's bonkers, right? You wouldn't do that to a customer, right? If a customer in your business, you wouldn't be like, hey, like, we'd love to talk to you about our products, but first, let me give you like the contract that you'll sign at the end and the 27 different ways, you may or may not breach it. Like, we wouldn't create that experience. There are places you can put that type of information. It's important employees have access to it, but put it somewhere where they can access it when they need it. Don't shove it at them as your first interaction with your brand. And, it's such a disappointing kind of end to that arc, isn't it? That initial arc where you think about getting a new job, then you find this company that you're interested in, you go and research it, you find out more, you go to the interview, you meet more people, and throughout that process you become more and more excited. You start to imagine yourself doing this job, working in this amazing place with these amazing people. And the first day comes and you'll turn up and you're super excited. And then, bam, here's this like list of rules and regulations. Like, what a terrible way to like interrupt that flow. Like, put that somewhere else. Well, just put that somewhere else and let's start our conversations with our people about the amazing work you could do here, and how to navigate the business, how to meet people more quickly. Let's spend the time and the effort and the paper, if that's what we're going to use, on helping people get settled quickly, getting to doing a great job.
Give them a sense of belonging, right? Take away that sort of like, oh, I feel a bit out of place, or I don't know how I fit. Like, spend time making people feel like, we are so happy you're here. We are so glad you chose us, right? We're so happy that your skill set is going to be added into the mix. And let's give you some of the answers to the tests so you don't have to figure this out. Like, let's make you feel welcome. Yeah,
exactly that. Like, let's treat them like people we like, not people we can't wait to get rid of.
Yeah.
It's so wild when you think about it, isn't it? If you map the employee experience, or you map how you communicate with people across all of those big moments, some of the decisions we make are pretty crazy. When you think about it like that, they really are. Why are we still doing things in exactly the same way over and over? And my theory is that every time we do something like that, it's because that's how it's always been done. It's because the 4 people in the job before us said, this is how we do an employee handbook. Here's all the risks and regulations. This is where we put it. This is the destination for it. And this is the touch point in which we communicate it with people. Why? At this moment, more than ever, I sort of really feel we've got this opportunity to find all those little weird things that we've been doing since the dawn of time and maybe not do them. That would be a great one to start with. It's true. Employee handbooks are full of rules.
Right. Full of rules, full of what not to do, full of like so many guideposts that you're like, there's no creativity. You have no idea how to make your mark. Didn't we hire you to, bring some innovation and some fresh thinking and a different perspective? And none of that sort of gets encouraged in either the written form or the verbalization. One of my theories, and my soapbox theories, is thinking about, if you're building a product of some kind or a service, you obsess over what you want every single touch point to be like. You sort of thread it through and you think about how that product looks and feels and sounds, and you think about the service level. And yet in the employee experience, we don't think of it like a product with a set of experiences we want you to have as you interface with the experience. And I think, I could say a lot more, but I just think that might be one of the keys to unlocking what you're talking about, Martin, which is this thoughtful, positive experience with how you interact with this new business and how you interact with your fellow team members and how you interact with leadership. If you thought about that as a product we're offering or a service we're offering, I think, when you designed it that way, and then you iterated when it didn't quite hit the mark, what do you think? Did that experience make you feel this or this? That sort of A/B testing as well. You know what I mean? I think all of that might be a way to address what I think is a huge point you're making, which is you've got to design in experiences and you have to design in how you want that person to feel interacting with you.
Totally agree. I think there's loads we can learn from our kind of marketing colleagues. Whilst he said, I'm not a big fan of internal marketing. In fact, I kind of hate that kind of concept altogether. But marketing as a profession, as a kind of sister adjacent profession to communications, are exceptionally good at not just firing stuff out into the world and forgetting. It's very carefully considered. They build their communications based on insight. Deep insight, lots of listening at every single touch point with the customer. And then they use that insight to continually iterate, to drive people through the funnel. There's a process to doing great marketing. And it's very thoughtful. And I'm not sure, we have that same rigor when it comes to our own people in the processes we design, in the experiences we create, in the communications that we write. I'm not sure we are actively listening and testing and iterating and testing again and iterating. I'm not sure we're there yet. I think we kind of build it once, go job done, throw it out into the world and then get on with the day job or whatever that may be.
Yeah. And sadly solve it from like a compliance perspective, so that sort of marriage between the HR world and the communications world and the marketing world, instead of that iterative experience oriented path. I will not forget what you said. It's like, well, let's tell you what not to do. Let's tell you all the things we don't want you to do. It's like, wow, yeah, this feels more like I've gone to prison and I'm in trouble. Like, and that will stick with me. That is such a pure point. Like, oh, right.
It would be interesting to just use that lens, Martin, wouldn't it? To use the lens at everything that we design. And it's almost your unique lens as a communication leader and an experienced leader. There's this handbook thing that, there's this document that's full of rules and regulations about what we can and can't do at work. And maybe that's not super motivating. Also, does anyone even read it? And maybe there just needs to be that lens through everything. Are we just adding noise and complexity to our people's day rather than value?
I mean, I would add like compliance training and onboarding of people generally to that kind of growing list of things we don't often do well. Partly is because I think we view these things through a lens of minimizing business risk and less through the lens of creating an amazing experience.
And I think it's so interesting that, again, is there not risk in many companies' products and services, but yet that's not what's led with. I loved what you said, you don't put that out there. Here's the contract you're going to sign when I've sold you this thing. Let's look at it up front. You don't do any of that. You don't talk about that. You just focus on what you're going to get out of the experience.
The products and the experience and the brand and, the benefits and features and all of that kind of good stuff. And then we get to the internal space. There's none of that. Like, what are the benefits of working at this company? What are the features of working here that you'll get here versus anywhere else? There's very little of that. Not none of it, but there's very little. Like I said, I think we mostly lead with risk mitigation. And then if we can wrap some lovely stuff around that, so much the better, but then not always.
Imagine this was a blender and we led with, you may get your fingers blended if you... You may. You probably won't, but you may. It's not quite cutting it, is it? Maybe we should go like this. Is going to make a lovely puree.
Yep.
There's something in it. There is something in it. Okay, well, on that note, the second question, which is sort of about an untouchable idea. And I think at work, there's loads of those. There's things that we are conditioned to almost design around. We think that whether it's communications or it's HR or employee experience, it's an amalgamation of all of it. There are things that we just don't touch. What do you think those are? Or is there one that you would like to change, I guess?
Gosh, there's probably so many. There definitely are so many, but let me kind of focus in on one that's in my area of expertise. That's kind of maybe business agnostic and is more to do with communications generally. And that's this idea that communications in the business setting is about talking at people or talking to people, generally talking at people, actually. And that the role of your communications function is to talk to specific stakeholders, to push your message out into the world, whether that's in the PR space to journalists and agencies, or in the kind of corporate communication space, and maybe that's to stakeholders in government, or in the internal comms space, maybe to employees. But the main thrust of the role is, I have something I want to say, and you will take that out to the world. I think the days of doing that are gone, or will soon to be gone if they have not already gone. Now, I think if you want to be a really effective communicator, you have to listen first and listen regularly. And actually, if you're a leader and you're kind of watching this podcast and you're thinking about what you might want to do with your communications team or your own communications in the future, I would strongly urge people to start to think about how they can leverage the skills of their communications people and the networks that they have to do more listening. And to use that skill to drive business decisions. Because to the point we were talking about earlier with the story around, Phil and the Challenge Phil series and how that got him out into the business, the more insight you can gain, the better business decisions you are going to make. Your employees see things, particularly for senior leaders, that you will never see. Because there are layers between you and the activity, and those layers will, smooth and calm and, bleach away the detail until what you get is broadly good, broadly bad. But what you won't see is the actual warts and all experience you are creating for your people, for your customers, for your other stakeholders. The only way you get that is through deep listening, and your comms team will help you bypass that middle layer, that squishy bit in the middle where everything gets siphoned out and only the good news rises. They will, if you've got a great comms team, they will connect you to your people in a way that you won't be able to do on your own. And for the communicators themselves listening, like, there's this kind of ongoing discussion about how can communicators get a seat at the table, be closer to decision making, to influence the way the business operates before a decision is made, and then having to kind of, triage that at the end. The way you get there is by bringing meaningful insight, by helping better decisions get made. If you bring meaningful insight, if you kind of understand the commercial drivers of your business, if you understand the market context of your business, and you understand the kind of key priorities for your leadership team, and you bring regular insight to drive those outcomes, you will be invited to the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 1,000%. I really, +1, endorse everything that you're saying. This will be a bit of a corny reaction, but just to make the point clear, when you send, like, there was a show on in America called Undercover Boss. Maybe there's something like that in Europe as well, right? But it's the same premise, like, in terms of when that leader could really listen, and obviously in this case observe unobtrusively, which is, I think, where comms people can really help. I think that the learning, the immediacy of the learning, the shift in strategy quickly, the choices that CEO and others could make because of the interactions that were happening between employees or between customers, it was instantaneous, which is hugely valuable, changes the trajectory of the strategy, impacts revenue, the experience is changed. And I love the idea that, the internal team of people that are master communicators could sort of facilitate that and bring that forward. I think you're right. It would reshape the way decisions get made. And really, my big thing is culture is what decisions getting made when no one's watching, right? And so if you can open up the watching, can you imagine what you could do? And the listening with, some of the decisions that get made at the top of the house, which how many of us, and sometimes I've been at the top of the house too and completely blind, have gone and made decisions that, like, the whole ecosystem rejects. Like, are those people crazy? Do they even understand how this business works? How many times have you heard from the teams, do you even understand how this is working? So yeah, 100,000% yes.
I guess I bring kind of a lived experience of that, in that I started my career many years ago as a train driver, but we won't talk about that. That's for another show, maybe. And maybe we'll do it. Maybe we'll do a series on second.
Yes, jobs before.
But back in when I kind of my lead into corporate life was I was a retail advisor for Vodafone, so I was selling stuff in their shops, and the amount of frustration you would feel where stuff would come through, might be a specific product, a specific offer, or even just the way the tills work, the process for doing a particular transaction was just a mess. And you would look at it, you'd be like, how is this happening? Like, well, who are the people who run this company? Like, how can you not see that this is just a terrible, terrible mess? And, at first it's a bit of an irritant, and then it becomes a bit of an annoyance. And then over time, these are the small things. Like, I think we often think it's these big moments in time, like a big redundancy or a big business change, or, those are the things that really damage engagement, but they're not really. It's this day to day, like a bit like,
hiring a staff.
Like, yeah, it's just like the drip, 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 and it's like, this is terrible. And I keep having to do it. And after a while, you think, I'm just done. I'm off to get another job. And those are the things that get you. And then I moved into corporate life. I would often hear people, well-meaning, designing products or services or anti-fraud activity. I did some anti-fraud work for a while, and they'd be like, we need to do this because employees in the stores or the phones do X. I'd be like, that's not how, I know that's how it's written down, but that's not how people do that, right? Because that's terrible. That's not how people actually get the job done. And having that insight really accelerated my career early on, because I could make real differences. Like, I'd be like, well, that's actually not how that gets done. Or did you know this other thing? Or could I connect you with person A or B to give you better insight on that? Now, as an internal communicator, I have the opportunity to do that at scale for maybe 500 people a year or 1,000 people a year. One, that depends on the size of the listening project you want to put in place, but I can maybe connect leaders to 1,000 people a year. They don't necessarily have to go and spend 3 years working in a store like I did, but I can give you that many hours worth of insight in a month, and I can provide that with you to make business decisions. So I think there is massive value there. It's not always about going out and spending hours and hours and hundreds of hours. Sometimes it's about building the right framework and processes and ecosystem to enable good listening. It's great if you go and do it yourself. That would be, route A. But if you can't, you can enable that in your business.
You're almost a facilitator then, really, aren't you? You would be, the way that you're talking about it is you're seeing the shift of communications being the way that communications is intended as a word, which is forward, to the facilitation of communications across the business. The sort
Absolutely.
Of infrastructure of it.
Yeah, the groundwork, the connectivity, the infrastructure, the framework to happen. But then also, even if we think about the word communication, like, you're not really communicating if you're shouting at someone. You're just monologuing. You're just shouting at them for hours. The whole point of communication is reaching shared understanding, and then an agreed way forward. Is that the shadow of a man on a hill, or is it a ball coming to run us down? Let's have a conversation about it very quickly and come to a shared understanding of whether we're going to run away or whether we're going to go and hunt the ball. And as we've evolved, the same is true in the business setting. The point of corporate communication shouldn't be talking at people. We should be trying to come to a shared understanding about what is our purpose, values, direction of travel. What's the conversation we want to have? Where are you? Where are we right now? How do we come to an agreed way forward together? And that's much more effective and that involves listening. It involves listening to understand the other person's context first, so that then you can respond in kind. The alternative to that is where we are mostly today, which is just talk about 100 things in the hope that one of them resonates. And 99% of them are just so much wasted effort.
And also that, no offense to anyone, but the spin, like the employees, the team members, they know, they don't, new buzzwords for things and names for stuff. And it's better to just shoot them straight. If you are going to talk at them, then just tell them the damn truth, right? And as straight as possible. And I think the more you've listened along the way and you've adapted along the way, then you've earned points in the bank to be able to do that in those moments that matter, right?
Absolutely. And if you think about, like, Hollywood films are a good example. The art of storytelling means that you have to have light and shade. Like, you can't just talk. Like, imagine how boring a film would be if it started and it opened up and then it was just like Rocky at the top of the hill going, yeah, and it was like end. You're like, what was that? What was that? The end doesn't make any sense without the journey, right? You have to talk about the challenges, the context. You have to set up the hero. And that means acknowledging that some things are good, some things are bad, some things could be better. There are things in the way that we need to overcome, and here's how we'll get there. And then celebrating the wins along the way. But it has to be, you can't turn like positivity up to 100 and just blast that at people all of the time, because they become insensitized to it. And you don't get what you think you're going to get, which is moments of people going, I feel great about this business. What you get is just blindness. You need to encourage them to join you in solving some of the problems, acknowledging what they are, so that when you do win, you win together and everybody feels great about the win.
Yeah, it's almost a reflection of life, isn't it? If you think of an organization really as a group of humans who have joined the same thing and we're functioning together. And yet in life, we don't tend to put this crazy positive, this is what I'm going to be in the future. Yes, maybe we should do that on some days, but we still experience life's ups and downs and the sort of lovely monotony of normality of that. And that is okay in work as well. And just before we move on to the next question, Elaine, you said something earlier, you used a phrase which was master communicators. And it's really interesting to me that you use that because, as you know, my background is also communications. And Martin and I have talked about this a lot. communications is everybody's job, and it is everybody's job. If you are in a leadership position, we need to be a great communicator. It's everybody's job. It's not everybody's expertise. And those two things are really, really different. And Martin, I would be really interested to hear your view on what do you think your role is, the industry's role in sort of setting the standard for what leadership communication should look like? Because that isn't happening it's not happening in all organizations. There is leadership development, but those teams tend to sit separately to communications teams. And actually, shouldn't it be the communications team who are saying, this is what a great communicator looks like in this business? Not just in general, but in this business, this is how we communicate. What do you think of that?
I agree. I think if you look at some of the industry-specific research, so Gallagher do a really good annual report on the state of the sector, which looks at internal communications. What are some of the big priorities? Is it growing? Is it shrinking? Yeah, a whole bunch of stuff. Very useful insights. And line manager communications has been in the top 10 of that list for as long as I've been reading it. So I might say I'm wrong. I might have only been the last 5 years, but it seems like a really long time, and it's there and it doesn't shift. So how as a profession we solve that problem, well, I think it's time we started to figure it out, because it's been sat around in our top priorities for the best part of half a decade at least. I'm not sure it is rocket science. I think it's just hard. I think it's just hard, and so people are like, oh, I would love to do that, but it feels hard, and maybe my senior leadership team or my senior stakeholders actually want me to do a newsletter and an email and a video and a this and a that, and that's taken up all of my time. And then this thing that I really wanted to do to enable line managers, I just never got to, and so it just appears on the list the next year and the next year and the next year. But at some point, we need to have the hard conversation that says, yes, senior leadership visibility is important, but it is nowhere near as important as the relationship you have with your line manager and your line manager's boss. Like, proximity really matters, particularly in things like D&I and performance reviews, and culture setting. Like, there's a few things where proximity really matters, and having the most senior person in the company talk about that might be useful for direction setting, but it's not the most effective way. And so we really need to start thinking about what's the profile of our line managers. And the other thing is, like, that profile is going to be wildly different, right? You can be a line manager of 5 people in an office, and the average age of your team could be in their 40s. They could all have decades of experience behind them. You could be a line manager in a contact center, who is a community I've worked with a lot, and you could be 25 or 26, and you could have 30 direct reports with an average experience of like 18 months. And so what you need in each of those settings is quite different. The conversations you would have is quite different. The amount of time you get to communicate with your team is very different. And so I think it's past time, as communicators, we started to look at this audience, segment them, really get to understand their needs and their capability and what's available to them, and start to design support that makes them the most effective they can. Not everybody has to be amazing, but everybody has to be good enough to have meaningful conversations with their team.
Yeah, and I like the word support. We're harsh, no? We're really we bash leaders a lot. We say, right, they're terrible communicators. This person can't communicate. Why should that person get promoted and all of a sudden miraculously be a brilliant communicator?
Absolutely.
Why should that happen? It doesn't happen.
No, I agree. I would be a terrible CFO because Excel sheets are awful. And nobody expects me to be an amazing CFO. They just expect me to be able to balance my budget. So, the expectation on me commercially for my function is that I balance my budget and I balance my headcount and all that. And that's as far as it goes. But no one's expecting me to figure out return on capital or, future asset value, any of that type of stuff, because that's not my job. That's somebody else's job.
Right. But you know what I think you're both hitting on, which is a whole nother path to go down, and we won't today, is just this idea of capability and capacity at the front line, right? And it's such a linchpin position, like almost industry agnostic, the piling on of what these sort of frontline, less mature generally leaders, meaning mature in experience and depth and time, not that there's not some really experienced people, and just what we expect of them is pretty extraordinary, right? And so I think it's a combination of all the things you're both saying. It's process re-engineering. It's taking things off plates before putting more things on plates. Those skills are quite lacking. And, many of those frontline folks are what I call battlefield promotions. So there isn't any learning curve. You're just in it. And suddenly you're right. You could have 30 directs. You could have 8. You could have 3. And what you need is unique to the situation. And so how do you, again, go back to experience? How do you customize the design for the customer set that is this group of frontline leaders? And if you started to think of it that way, that it probably would be a multifaceted set of solves, but coordinate those solves. And I wonder what magic could really come out of that versus, again, you go back to, we just go at it one way. I love that analogy. We just shout at you. You've got to do this and you've got to do this and you've got to do this. And you're like, and what really happens, here's the real truth, is they pay no attention to the big stuff and they just learn to do it their way. And some of them get it right and some of them don't get it quite so right. And then you've got this muddy middle because you cannot absorb all that stuff coming at you. So you look internally for help and you look left and right and you figure it out with your team. That's the truth of what goes on. Yeah, it's a powerful one. This one, we could go for hours on this one. This one's that's a big one to choose, actually, Martin. It's a big, and it's so interesting and actually really fascinating that you from your seat see it and experience it. I from my seat, Hattie's seat, and yet we haven't really talked about it, have we? It's such an aha moment for me. I'm like, damn, what a gap.
But sadly not unique.
Sadly not unique. Yeah. All right, last question is, and maybe we've already touched on this, but I'll ask it. What do you think, or what do you wish more leaders just said out loud? Like, what do you wish they just said?
Do you know what? I wish they'd just say, I don't know. I just don't know. I think, all leaders, but particularly senior leaders, should be capable of setting direction, setting out strategy, and giving a clear vision for the future. They should probably be able to articulate the big projects and processes that will happen together. I think there's an expectation they would be able to do that. But I think many leaders take this to the extreme where they then feel they then have to have the answer to every question that might be thrown at them ever. And if they don't have the answer to every question, then it will be seen as a failure on their part. And so they would rather not talk about anything than get caught in a moment where they had to say, I don't know. I'll have to come back to you. Or better still, I don't know, but I'd love to hear what you think. I'm not sure enough leaders have that phrase in their toolkit yet. I don't know, but I would love to know what you think. So tell me in this way or that way.
That is so true. It's funny to think about leaders in this way. How often do we say, the main job that I have as a leader is to give clarity? I don't know that we don't say that very often. I don't see that very often. I don't set it myself. If I'm building leadership expectations for teams, it's very, very rare that I'll say your main capability, the core expectation I have of you as a leader, is to go and give your teams clarity. And I think what you're saying, Martin, is part of that. Because if we don't have the clarity, that is fine. Sometimes clarity is, I'm going to go find it. Or shall we make it together? What is your idea? What solution could we come up with? If you thought about a leader as the facilitator of clarity, I don't know. I feel like that would be quite a new idea in a way.
I also think there's something really powerful about, I always say people love to help. And they love to share their expertise. They love to share a thought, but you have to sometimes invite that in. And if you're just that leader that doesn't have that invitation out there, or it doesn't seem like you're going to welcome it, or, it's a tense moment and God forbid, you don't want to make this worse. But when you simply say, gosh, I don't know, what do you think? All of a sudden, it's amazing. It's always been amazing how people will jump in and say, well, what if we try this? Or what if we figure this out? And maybe it's, you have a different idea, but there's something magical about getting that to happen. And it doesn't come until you admit that you don't have all the answers. I just think there's something much more authentic about that, because you can't have all the answers. There's just no way. There's no way. That's just not truthful, right?
And when you're trying to, you often get it wrong.
Yeah.
And that's where you get this moment where you try and, particularly when you're engaging with people who are very far away from your position, I think you can probably cosplay having all of the answers with your senior leaders because you're probably closer to their job. You can probably get away with that to a greater or lesser extent for a long period. But as you start to get towards your more frontline people, or people whose just experience is very different from your own, it becomes much harder. And I think that's when you're much more likely to say something with absolute certainty that is absolutely wrong. and you lose all credibility. People are just like, what is this person talking about? And everything you say after that is tarnished forever because they feel like you have no idea. So I think it's fine to say, Eliza, I think it's fine to say, I don't know, for all the reasons you said. One, you get all of this insight and richness and you build this culture of people giving to the business, but also like your most engaged, in fact, most people, not even just your most engaged employees, but most people want to build your business with you. They want to build things and create things and make things. They don't want to turn up and just like press the button for 300 days a year and then go home and collect the paycheck. Some people will want to do that, but most people in your business want to feel like they are contributing and building and growing, and they can shape the future of the business. The easiest way to create that feeling is to say, I know where we want to go, but this bit and this bit, I don't know. I want your help. Help me to get over this hurdle. And then before you know it, you'll get all of that good stuff we know you get from engagement, the ideas, the collaboration, the extra effort, and all that kind of good stuff. But you do not get that if you show up with all the answers pre-baked in an FAQ document and you are polished like a shiny stone. You lose all of that opportunity if that's how you show up.
I really like this idea of there are lots of or multiple routes to clarity. And maybe to go back to your first word that we were binning, which was collaboration. This is what collaboration should be. No, this is opening. This is not fake collaboration to make sure that we're navigating risk. This is collaboration to get to clarity in a way that, is truly meaningful. Yeah. So Martin, thank you. Thank you. There are things, I know I'm not meant to be writing while we're doing podcasts. I'm meant to be not making any noise. And Lucy, who's going to edit this, is going to tell me to be quiet with my pen. You've given so many new thought starters, I think. So, yeah, thank you so much for spending the time. Thank you for sharing what you're going to bin or trash if we're in the US.
Bin, trash, rubbish, it's all good.
It's all the same.
Yeah. And listen, everyone who's spent some time with us today in this conversation, if you're wondering what's truly possible in your own workplace and the things that you might want to bin or think about in a different way, hopefully this has been a spark that triggers that new thought for you, gives you a little bit of inspiration, practical ideas, and just I've taken a few away myself today for sure, and just that renewed sense of possibility that there is no one telling us what to do. We're here together, in it together, and we have to figure this stuff out. So hopefully this is a place that helps you do that when you come and join us on the WorkPossible podcast.
From first hellos to fond farewells, Fauna designs employee experiences for happier people, stronger teams, and better businesses. No frameworks, no playbooks, just real transformation. Are you ready to experience possible? Visit thefauna.co.uk. You've been listening to WorkPossible, a special series of the CultureCon podcast. We hope today's conversation has sparked some possibilities for you. Subscribe for fresh perspectives, ideas bold enough to change things, and a whole host of opportunities to bin the playbook.
That's a wrap on this episode of the official CultureCon podcast.
If you got something out of it, share it with a friend, teammate, or fellow culture geek.
And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Until next time.